Let's paint Nurglings. Before you start painting, make sure you prime your minis. I'm using Style and Res White here because I want to have easy coverage for my first couple base coats. It's time to base coat the skin. I'm mixing a tiny bit of orange into white to create a nice beige color and then using this as the starting point for the skin for the Nurglings. For your base coat, the paint consistency should only be slightly watered down. This is going to ensure the paint has nice coverage, but since we're covering white primer, you should only have to use 2 thin coats at most. After that step, you will have the rare albino Nurgling. To fix that, we are going to paint some of the Nurglings with Death Guard green. When I put this on my wet palette, I am mixing it with some white to create a lighter Death Guard green and then applying this to select Nurglings. Be intentional about which Nurglings you paint green. I am going for a 50-50 split, both from the front view and the back view. This is going to create a nice color scheme for these Nurglings. Now it is time for the most tedious step in this entire process, and that is to paint the horns black. You do not have to paint the horns black, but I am doing so here because I like the look on the box art. If you make any mistakes on this step, which is highly likely due to the amount of horns on these models, you just have to touch it up with either white or green. After finishing up the base coat on the horns, it is now time to give the Nurglings a bath, starting with the green ones. For the wash, I'm using a mixture of Vallejo Flat Green and Agrex Earthshade. This creates a dark green wash that I can use to shade all of the recesses in the skin. I'm adding a little bit of water here as well so that it does not have too strong of coverage when I paint it over the main surface areas of the skin. When applying this wash, the goal here is to shade in any detail on this model, and this model has a lot of detail. What you'll see from the video is that I am focusing the tip of my brush on the areas around the horns as well as their faces and all of the folds in their skin. Now that the green Nurglings are painted, it is now time to paint the pink ones. To get the color I want, I'm mixing flat red and Druchii violet to create a dark red magenta color. You can make this pink if you want by mixing in more red, but be sure to water this down. The reason why we want to water this down is so that when we apply it to the model, the mixture flows into all of the cracks and recesses. Just like when painting the green skin, I am focusing on all of the facial details and folds in their skin. When applying the wash, I'm using the brush to sweep the paint into the crevices in the skin. If you do this properly, the skin should have a natural highlight. After giving your Nurglings a bath, it is now time to highlight the skin. I am first going to focus on the green Nurglings. To get the color for the first layer, I am mixing a skin tone color with Death Guard green. For this layer, I am using a glaze consistency paint and wicking off excess moisture from the brush onto a paper towel before painting the miniature. Because of this, each brushstroke does not deposit too much pigmentation onto the model. This allows me to build up my highlights layer by layer and create smooth transitions. For my second layer, I am mixing in white to my already existing mixture to create a brighter color. For these highlights, I am focusing on an even smaller section than the last highlight layer. This is going to create a more focused area of brightness on each of the Nurgling skin, bringing out all of the detail. Some key areas to focus on are the facial details, their shoulders, the tops of their arms, any details going on their bellies and their knees. After highlighting the green Nurglings, it is now time to highlight the magenta ones. For the highlight layer, I am using yellow ochre and white to create a beige color. After getting the beige color, I then highlight the pink nurglings just like the green nurglings. On this step, I want to get smooth transitions, and to do this, I am using a thin down paint that is at a glaze consistency, and then I'm applying this to the model using scratch-like motions and trying to deposit not too much pigmentation on the model. This is very good practice for highlighting, and I would advise to take your time on this step and try to get as smooth as a result as you can. And that wraps up the skin. You can spend as long or as little time on this step as you want. Generally, the longer time you spend here, the better your models are going to look. For all of the flesh wounds and tongues, I am going to be mixing red and purple to create a reddish magenta color to use as a base coat. When painting these areas, make sure that your paint is a base coat consistency. This is a level of thickness that is slightly thinner than as the paint comes out of the pot. When painting the flesh wounds on their back, it helps to have a paint that is a little bit thinner so that it flows into all of the recesses. After the base coat dries, I took some Druki Violet, added a little bit of water to water it down, and then I poked this into all the holes and washed the tongues. After the wash dried, I wanted to do some highlights. To get the color I wanted, I mix flat flesh in with my magenta base coat to create a reddish skin tone. When highlighting these sections, make sure that you're using the edge of your brush on the edges of the tongues. It should not take that long as there's not too many red sections on this model. To finish up this section, I created a third highlight by adding more flat flesh into my mixture to create a brighter color. For this highlight, I am covering less surface area than the previous layer and primarily focusing on the most raised areas. You can see here that I'm paying extra attention to the Nurglings front and center. It is now time to paint the eyes. This model has a million eyes on it, and if you are not good at painting eyes and you are painting this model, you are about to get a lot of practice. I am using a very small needle-like brush here and just dabbing these eyeballs to make sure that I don't overspill. Because I love to suffer and paint eyeballs, I decided to switch the color to red. Now what you will see here is that I am using my size 2 brush instead of my trusty needle brush, and this caused me to make a couple mistakes, but I will show you in the next step how I managed to fix them quickly and easily. To fix my mistakes, I mix Agrex Earthshade with black to create a very dark wash. I also watered this down a tiny bit with water. I then wicked the excess moisture onto a paper towel and then poked this into all of the eyes. This effectively created a very dark shadow or shade around each of the eyes without covering the red on the eyeballs. I also poked this into the mouths to create some additional shading there as well. After this, I thought it would be a good time to brighten up their teeth. To do this, I just took white and tapped this on each individual tooth on the model. Believe it or not, this step is not as difficult as you might think. I'm just using the edge of my brush here and catching the edge of each tooth with the paint. To commit heresy, mix Macragge Blue with black and use this to highlight the Nurgling's horns. On this step, I am not aiming to rebase coat the entire horn. Instead, I am just aiming to cover the most exposed areas on all of the Nurgling's horns. For the next highlight, I mixed in white with my existing blue color to create a lighter blue. Then I applied this to the upper 2/3 section on each horn. For the final highlight, I mix in white with my existing mixture to create a very bright color, and then I apply this to all of the tips on the horns. What you'll notice here is that I'm using the edge of my brush and using a swiping motion to quickly paint all of these areas. After finishing up the horns, the Nurglings are complete. The only thing left to do is to base the model. To base the model, I am taking Elmer's glue and spreading this thickly over all of the exposed areas on the base. On this step, I am using a slightly damp brush so that it spreads easier and being very careful to avoid the toes. To add texture, I give him a little twirly-whirly and some sand and then tap off the excess. If you are wondering, I got this bag of sand from Hobby Lobby for around $3. Because these are Nurglings, I want to add some goopy textures to the base. To do this, while the glue is still drying, take a hobby knife and remove certain sections of the sand, creating channels. After the channels were created, I added a generous amount of glue into each of these sections. This is going to be the base for the goopy textures on the base. To add some color and build up these areas further, I mixed refractive green, glue, and bright yellow in equal parts to create a very thick goopy paint. And then I applied this on top of those glued sections, and now it is really starting to look like a proper Nurgling base. After you are happy with the result, it is now time to paint the sand. To do this, I am using apple barrel paint, chocolate sprinkle, watering it down, and using this as my first base coat. Because I've watered this down, you can see here that it is soaking very easily into all the sand. After that had dried some, I mixed in black with brown to create a darker brown color and then applied this to the sand. You want to make sure that the paint is wet enough to fully saturate the sand. This is because once it dries, it will act as a seal and hold all of the granules in place. To highlight the goopy sections on the base, I used moot green to edge highlight these areas. To smooth the transitions on the goop, I mixed in refractive green with moot green to create a slightly darker color. I then applied this on all of the areas on the goop where the dark colors touch the green highlights. With that, our Nurglings are finished. Don't forget to paint the base of the rim black and leave the base a couple hours to dry. And that is it for the video. I hope after watching this, you now have the confidence to go and paint your own awesome looking Nurglings. These guys are super fun, and I think that they are a staple in any Death Guard collector's army. If you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and I will catch you in the next one.